Subscribe now. EU Debates.
We of course, we live in uncertain and difficult times, but we try also to act and to take decisions that are a little bit forward-looking and addressing our companies to cope with their immediate challenges, but also to create conditions for them to grow, to invest, to create more jobs. So this is the framework that we have, taking today action to address a long-standing problem in corporate taxation, which is the so-called debt equity bias. We are proposing a debt equity bias reduction allowance, DEBRA, as you said. It is one of the key initiatives of the business taxation plan that we presented last year. And I think it is also one of the important measures to strengthen, as we frequently try, our capital markets union, our plan to build a true single market for capital in the EU. So today, most countries' tax systems, including in the Union, treat debt more favorably than equity. They do so by allowing interest payments on loans to be deducted from the taxable base without offering a similar allowance for financing through equity. This gives businesses looking to fund investments a major advantage or incentive to borrow rather than to issue equity. And this is a problem because it encourages companies to make economic decisions based purely on their tax treatment rather than on commercial considerations that may ultimately leave businesses more vulnerable to insolvency and financial instability. Just to mention a figure, the total indebtedness of non-financial corporations in the EU amounted in 2020 to almost 14.9 trillion, or 111% of GDP. Taxation should be a means to an end, not a goal in itself. And I want companies to be able to choose the source of financing that is best for their business model. But for that to happen, equity must receive a similar tax treatment as debt, so that companies can consider both options on an equal footing. Today's proposal will create a level playing field for debt and equity by making equity tax deductible, just as debt currently is. This measure will contribute to the re-equitization of companies, making them stronger and more sustainable. This is our goal. It will also support new innovative businesses, which usually have more trouble securing loans than more established firms. This is also why we will be offering a more favorable rate of deduction for SMEs, given that they often have more difficulty in obtaining financing than larger companies, of course. This initiative is important for individual companies, but also for the European Union as a whole. We know that the green and digital transition, for example, can only be achieved through new and innovative investments. In fact, more than half of the green investments in the coming years should come from new technologies, and this will require sustainable financing. And equity has a key role to play in this effort. Under our proposal, the equity allowance would be computed based on the difference between net equity at the end of the current tax year and net equity at the end of the previous tax year, multiplied by a notional interest rate. The allowance on equity is deductible for 10 consecutive tax years, as long as it does not exceed 30% of the taxpayer's taxable income. We have already similar schemes in place in 6 member states: Belgium, Cyprus, Italy, Malta, Poland, and Portugal. But an uncoordinated patchwork of rules can create room for harmful tax practices by attracting businesses purely for tax motives. So we will have a transition period for these 6 member states to build this common frame. With DEBRA, we can ensure that the EU businesses are treated equally in terms of taxation concerning their financing choices, regardless of where they are located or whether they choose to finance themselves through equity or debt instruments. A harmonized solution to the debt-equity bias will make the business environment in Europe more predictable and more globally competitive, boosting our equity markets that, as you know, are lagging behind if we compare them, for example, with the United States. Our proposal aims to help companies build up more solid capital, which means they will be less vulnerable and more likely to invest and take risks. In fact, we expect the combined approach of equity allowance and limited interest deduction to increase investments by around 1/4 point of GDP, according to our impact assessment. And that will also be good news for growth and jobs for the EU. Thank you, and I'm waiting for your questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We can now open up the floor to your questions.